Who said love is not blind? For Victims and Villains, my name is Josh, and today we are talking about the brand new Christopher Landon thriller. This is Drop. It tells the story of a widow that gets back into the dating game. First date, essentially, with said party goes a little bit sideways, and chaos ensues. Christopher Landon is just one of those directors making genre pictures today that if his name is attached to the project in any capacity, I will be there going to see it. Like much of my generation, many of us were introduced to Landon in either Disturbia or the Paranormal Activity franchise that have kind of gone on to have an affinity for him thanks to movies like Happy Death Day and films like Drop. Landon proves that once again that he is one of the greatest filmmakers working in the genre space today. And Drop is just a fantastic movie from its gripping start till the time the credits roll. This movie just had me literally on the edge of my seat, the edge of tears at some point, and the edge of my funny bone just by how much I was laughing. And I would kind of start off with the comedy. The comedic elements in Drop don't always work for me. There were some that felt really forced. There were some that were just very dry, that just kind of felt very awkward in their placement. And you could definitely tell that humor is a way to kind of break up the tension and kind of create this environment for red herrings and where they can soar. And I think Drop does a really good job at doing the latter, but it comes at a cost of what should have been comedy. And unfortunately, I would probably say that half the time the comedy just doesn't land here. And again, comedy is subjective, so what didn't work for me might have worked for somebody else. This might be a weird comparison to make, but the way that this film uses comedy, it kind of almost felt like I Think You Should Leave. Now, I love Tim Robinson. Friendship is one of my most anticipated movies of this year, but there are definitely sketches in that show that comedy just did not work for me. And I've talked to some people that also feel the same way, and I kind of feel like that's the best way to describe this comedy. Some of it really works, some of it really doesn't. And all in all, the comedy aspects in Drop just feel very much akin to that dry, awkward kind of sense of humor that you're used to with Tim Robinson. I think the thing that surprises me most about Drop is just how heavy some of the emotional beats in this movie actually are. And maybe this is just subjective, maybe this is my experience and some of the things that I've been going through in my own mental health journey, but there was a point in literally the first 10 minutes of this movie where we open on a flashback, but then we progress into modern day, and the modern day scene almost had me in tears. I was so incredibly surprised by that. But then there are so many more moments littered throughout the course of this that just hit just as hard. And it is just this journey of really reaffirming yourself and the fact that you have value as an individual following an episode of trauma or a traumatic season in your life. And some of that comes down to three basic factors. The direction by Landon, who proves once again, as I mentioned earlier, he is one of the best directors working in genre today. It comes from the incredible script from Chris Roach and Jillian Jacobs, but also the dynamic and just almost transformative performance from Meghann Fahy. Like, there's this level of charisma that she just possesses, the way that she carries herself throughout the course of this film, and also at the same time, the way that she emotes herself, I feel like is also worth talking about. Like, you can definitely see this sense of dread and fear, but also at the same time, you can also kind of see this mystery and intrigue and intelligence without her even having to say a word. And her chemistry with leading man Brandon Sklenar just really just solidifies this as, again, just a incredible, exceptional performance from her. But also Sklenar is also a performance worth talking about and worth mentioning. Like, again, just has this charisma and this gentle caringness about him that I feel like just really works between the two of them and also helps the performances stand alone. And the way that Landon as a storyteller uses tension in here is just feels otherworldly. Like, first dates are awkward enough as they are, and there's another subplot of a couple doing a blind date in 2025, which again feels kind of dated, but also is used very smartly throughout the course of the story as a subplot. But I will say that the first dates in and of themselves can be awkward, and that awkwardness really lends itself beautifully to the tension. And I think just kind of also with Fahy's character and her story arc, again, just leans into that tension. Like, everything just feels so purposeful here. Well, I will say by the time that we actually reach the climax of this, everything that has been building to it, where you're expecting an explosion, this just kind of feels like a fizzle. The would-be space for the storytelling that should have created said explosion just feels very cliche and somewhat just kind of predictable. Like, they used all of their best ideas literally throughout the course of this movie and didn't really know how to end it. And that's probably one of my biggest complaints about this movie is, yes, some of the comedy doesn't always land, but the thing that you've been building up to doesn't feel as impactful as it should while I'm leaving the theater. But again, every other element of this movie that you want to kind of be impactful on you, like I said, this thing impacted me very emotionally that I was not expecting to respond to. The performance from Fahy, as well as some of the other performances in this movie as well, tension that Landon creates here, like the way that the score and the script works. Like, there are so many other things that work about it that by the time you kind of you have this, like, just this mentality of grace and forgiveness for kind of the somewhat cliche climax of this movie. With that said, I am ready to run drop through our Rorschach rating scale. I'm going to go ahead and give Drop a solid 4 out of 5. This movie surprised me in a lot of ways. This movie was way funnier than I expected it to be, even if the comedy doesn't always land. The emotional beats in this movie are some of the best that I've come across in recent horror entries. Period. Christopher Landon once again solidifies himself as one of the best storytellers in the genre space working today. And Meghann Fahy is absolutely exceptional in this role, and the way that Landon and Fahy, for performance and direction, weave together tension and anxiety, everything feels intentional, even if it doesn't always explode the way that you want it to. If you guys have seen Drop, what did you guys think? Comment below, let me know, but let's drop in some truth about mental health. If you guys are new to our content, Mental Health Moment is where we take a theme of mental health out of the film which we're reviewing, talk about it for a few moments in the hopes to deconstruct the stigma surrounding mental health. Drop is one of those movies that I feel like could take an entire podcast just to deconstruct all of the mental health notes and themes woven throughout the course of this movie. And it is my goal that Abyss Gazing will do a episode on this movie when it hits streaming, or when it's more readily available past the theatrical stage. So fingers crossed it happens by the end of this year. But as I mentioned earlier, there is a point in this movie where we kind of find out that Fahy's character is a counselor or therapist of sorts, and she is in the middle of a session very early on in this film from a woman that is essentially, we're led to believe, is getting out of a very toxic situation, and she just kind of has a very low self-esteem. And there's a practice that Fahy's character makes this woman intentionally go through where she turns on her camera, ignores Fahy's existence and presence within the frame, and has her look at herself, and much like the tradition of Candyman, makes her say that she is enough, and just kind of goes through that exercise of just reaffirming. And honestly, I don't think that I need to kind of dig down deep or kind of really complicate that truth. This is just a challenge to find time throughout the day to really just reaffirm yourself and your value and your worth as an individual and as your own person. Fahy's character says in the movie that it needs to be your voice that you are hearing, and it needs to be your truth that you are speaking out so that your brain can actually start to accept it as truth. And I think that same thing goes for us, that we struggle in, those of us that are struggling in depression or self-esteem issues or addiction or self-harm or whatever type of mental health things that we may be struggling with. At the end of the day, just reaffirming yourself that you are enough. Sometimes that practice may be necessary for upwards of a few years until we actually start to believe it. But again, it is just that practice of forming the habit of reaffirming yourself and your own value and your own worth. And moments like that become crucial after a season of trauma or something that invokes trauma in and of itself. Because you are enough, you do have value, you do have worth, and I just want to reaffirm that and kind of start that and challenge you to prepare yourself to kind of go over that affirmation journey once a day at bare minimal over the course of the next few weeks or months or years or however long it takes for your situation. As always, if you or someone you know is struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, click the links in the show notes below to check out our mental health resource library. Drop is now playing in theaters everywhere from Universal Pictures, Platinum Dunes, and Blumhouse. Once again, in the show notes below, you guys will find links to our mental health resource library, our podcast network, more movie reviews like the one you're watching right now, links to our social media, how to support us financially from Patreon and Paramount Plus, and that subscribe button. So until next time, remember to keep it classy, keep it spooky. Have a great night.